Welcome to Deepest Lore, a series where we examine the video game stories you probably never even noticed were there. Sometimes a video game has a story that's easy to miss. Until the mid-90s, it was common for the story to never really be explained outside the manual. Even today, points are frequently mistranslated or even intentionally changed or removed in localization. Some games have very subtle stories that rely on the slow buildup of details, even across multiple sequels, and aren't explicitly laid out for you. And a lot of games are just obviously all about the gameplay, and never really give players a reason to pay attention to whatever story there may be. Today we'll be taking a look at a series that qualifies for all of these traits. That series being Sonic the Hedgehog. Nah, not that new stuff, I'm talking about classic Sonic. That franchise was everywhere in the 90s. It made Sega a household name.
Your column's free. What Nintendo?
At least until they ruined it when they made the series 3D. And not just the gameplay either. Suddenly the game started having these serious, edgy plots. Now Sonic games are about gods and monsters and ancient civilizations. What is this, Final Fantasy? What happened to when it was just about a blue hedgehog who runs fast? And if they were going to suddenly give Sonic games a story, why didn't they use one like the cartoons? Or the comics? Remember those? A cool group of freedom fighters trying to free the world from Robotnik's tyrannical rule. Why'd they make up all this new stuff? Well, because it wasn't new. What if I told you that the story of Sonic Adventure was actually the finale of a story arc that was being built up since the very first Sonic game? At least if you lived in Japan. A lot of this story, though not all of it, was removed from the localized manuals, and practically none of it was ever used in any adaptation. But since these games are mostly made by Japanese developers, they had the Japanese version of the story in mind while making the games. As such, this is the version that is referenced in the games themselves. And this would become more evident as the series went on.
Whatever you say, Eggman!
But the story was always there, being built up over time. And very little of the extensive backstory given in Sonic Adventure was actually new to that game. So let's take a look at how, from the very first game, classic Sonic always had the deepest lore. Sonic, that annoying, impertinent hedgehog. Thanks to him, my great plans are always laid to waste. Oh, but this time, I'm going to rub him out with the power of science! While 1991's Sonic the Hedgehog on Genesis is the first Sonic game chronologically, it is not the first time Sonic and Eggman have battled. What makes this battle different from Sonic and Eggman's earlier conflicts is the fact that this is the first time the 6 Chaos Emeralds have been involved, and the first time Eggman has thought of imprisoning Sonic's animal friends. In fact, it is specifically the fact that Sonic always attracts animal friends to help him every time they fight that gives the Mad Doctor the idea to capture the residents of their latest battleground and have them join his side instead. This marks the beginning of a new era in Eggman's fight with the Blue Blur, an era that would last until 2003's Sonic Heroes, when he seemingly gives up on animals powering his robots. It also means that the idea of many animal friends fighting along with Sonic, as we see in many of the early 3D games, was in fact canon all along. We just didn't get to play as them yet. Now, some people seem to think that in the Japanese versions, Eggman's motivations were to boil the world's largest egg, but this is actually just from the first manga adaptation. It's actually a pretty faithful adaptation in most other regards, the most faithful Sonic adaptation there is. But in the original game or its manual, all that's said about Eggman's motivation is the Chaos Emeralds are super material that give energy to all living beings. Also, when applied to scientific purposes, they can be used for nuclear and laser-based weaponry. This time, the world really will be all mine. The setting of the game, South Island, is a mythical land that floats throughout the seas, and as such is seen only as a legend. Eggman theorizes that this movement could only be caused by the 6 magical stones, and sets his goals to finding the floating island and capturing the Chaos Emeralds that power it. Long story short, Sonic grabs the emeralds first on his way to smashing Eggman's factory base in the Scrap Brain Zone, only to have the emeralds mysteriously scatter once the threat is over. Many people don't realize that the 8-bit version of Sonic the Hedgehog is in fact an entirely different game. and a pretty decent one too. However, it does not have much of an original story. In fact, it would be easy to think that it occupies the same place in the timeline, and is merely an alternate retelling where Sonic took a slightly different path through South Island to defeat Eggman. However, the manual does act as if you already know that South Island moves throughout the seas, and then expands on this concept. So apparently Eggman was just trying the exact same plan again. And it wouldn't be the last time either. After all, like in the first game, we're told that this is not the first time Sonic and Eggman have fought. And in this game, it is not implied that this is the first time Eggman has tried to grab the emeralds. In addition, some new information is given. Most importantly, these stones deal to all life a terrific energy. New techniques basing themselves on nuclear weapons and laser radii are then possible. But they are not necessary should these stones fall between bad hands that don't understand their power. This is the first mention of the emeralds bringing destruction, even when not deliberately used for weapons. This is something that will become integral to the story in later games. This game's manual is also the first source to mention that, due to its movement, the island started forming an interdimensional torsion in which the Chaos Emeralds wander. We'll recognize this as the special stage, which is ironic since this is one of the few games where the emeralds are collected outside of the special stage, which is merely used for extra lives and continues. Another nice feature is that this version of Sonic 1 gives us a map of South Island. Only a few of the levels are the same as the more famous Sonic 1, but it's still neat to know where those, along with the less famous levels exclusive to this game, are placed geographically. And speaking of exclusive levels, one of the more interesting locations unique to this version of Sonic 1 is Skybase Zone, the first of Eggman's many flying fortresses. But even with this new technology at his disposal, Eggman is still defeated, with Sonic grabbing the 6 Chaos Emeralds along the way. Of course, once the threat is over, the emeralds scatter once again, and Sonic serenades us with his own vocal rendition of the ending credits song, sung in his 8-bit voice. This is the closest we ever get to canonizing the idea of Sonic being in a band, an idea that was scrapped before the release of the first Sonic game. For now, let's skip the events of Sega Sonic the Hedgehog and Sonic CD, which I'll argue later actually take place before Sonic 2. Suffice to say, Eggman tries some time travel stuff and still loses, so he goes back to his old ways, beginning with the 8-bit version of Sonic 2. Unlike the first 8-bit game, this one changes things up a bit more relative to the other game called Sonic 2. In this case, the 8-bit version was actually released first, which makes sense because its story fits well if we place before the more famous Sonic the Hedgehog 2. In the opening cutscene, we are introduced to a two-tailed fox, who fans of the series will immediately recognize. The fox strolls through the forest when Sonic suddenly dashes in. This matches relatively well with the story of how Sonic and Tails met, as detailed in the manual of the 16-bit Sonic the Hedgehog 2, and in a cutscene from Sonic Adventure. What those recaps don't cover, however, is how Tails is soon captured by Eggman and held hostage. Eggman's newest attempt to gather the Chaos Emeralds from South Island involves forcing Sonic to collect them for him, in order to trade for Tails' life. Of note is that the 8-bit version of Sonic 2 is the first game in the series with a secret level or a substantial alternate ending, things even the 16-bit Sonic 2 would not have. The normal final boss of the game is Robo-Sonic, a Sonic robot who's mostly been forgotten in favor of Metal Sonic from Sonic CD. But Metal Sonic either doesn't exist yet, or is stuck in the future, as we'll see soon. Plus, Robo-Sonic is powered by a Chaos Emerald. In a somewhat infamous bad end, if Sonic fails to collect 5 Chaos Emeralds before defeating Robo-Sonic and collecting the 6th from his smashed corpse, he runs off into the night with the bittersweet knowledge that he defeated Eggman's plan, but failed to rescue Tails. On the other hand, if you can gather 5 emeralds before gaining the final one from Robo-Sonic, Sonic continues on to the Crystal Egg Zone, defeats Eggman, and saves Tails. We don't see the emeralds scatter this time, but since we've already seen it a few times, and it's required for later games to make any sense, I think we can figure it's implied. As mentioned, there is some dispute on if a few games, including this one, take place before or after the 16-bit Sonic 2. Since it makes sense to consider this game the final entry in what can be called the South Island Saga, I'm in favor of it taking place before. Remember how the emeralds bring about great destruction? Well, that's about to become very relevant. The mysterious jewels hold infinite power, but are also dangerous if used incorrectly. Now the Chaos Emeralds are sought out by the evil scientist Dr. Eggman again. When Sonic and Tails quickly returned to South Island, they found the Island of Peace was in total chaos. As one of the jewels were taken, the remaining Chaos Emeralds were scattered about the island, which was now sinking into the sea. After Sonic once again defeats Eggman and saves the island, the forces that keep moving the Chaos Emeralds try sending the emeralds to a new location, a place that Sonic and Eggman might not find as quickly, since they've obviously ruined South Island as a hiding place, and now endangered its very existence. Though South Island would soon be mostly free of the emeralds, moving them would only lead to worldwide danger. Note that all of the games referenced so far come from before Sonic 2, the first main series sequel, made by the original developers, and not limited by being a handheld spin-off. So now that we're done with the intro, tune in next time when we examine the arc that most would consider the highlight of the classic Sonic era, the arc that introduced most of the world and backstory that the rest of the series would revolve around, the arc that would introduce some of video games' deepest lore.